Well, Matt Campbell has officially arrived at Penn State, which means Jimmy Rogers has arrived at Iowa State. We're going to talk about the changes that are probably going to be coming to Ames. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Big 12 Deep Dive. If this is your first time here, hopefully you enjoy this episode. I have several other episodes that I've made before in the past. Feel free to go check those out if you want. Well, if you're an Iowa State fan, it has been a long couple of days. Thank God our basketball team won and beat Purdue on Saturday. That was made up a little bit. We were sad and crying on, Friday when the news broke about Matt Campbell, and Saturday we were crying again, but for a different reason, because our basketball team is unbelievable, which we're going to be talking about in the next coming weeks, because obviously we're starting to get into the full flow of basketball season. But today we're going to talk more football. This will probably be the last football episode that I'll make, at least for Iowa State football for a while. Obviously, we're going to talk about this more in this episode, but, transfer portal, once that opens up, we'll probably talk about it again a little bit more. But for right now, we're going to talk about the changes that are happening. But Jimmy Rogers has arrived at Ames. Well, I guess it was yesterday or 2 days ago, maybe. Same thing with Matt Campbell, but they both gave their first press conferences today as the new head coaches of each respective team. Matt Campbell is also bringing John Heacock with him, our defensive coordinator. I haven't heard a ton on Taylor Mauser. I'm sure something will come out soon with him, though, as well. But Heacock is officially going to Penn State with Matt Campbell, which means Iowa State's not going to have the 3-3-5 defense anymore. Penn State will obviously adapt that as well. One of the things that I want to take away from Matt Campbell in his press conference today was he said it was the hardest thing to leave the great people at Iowa State who took a chance on him and gave him the keys to build a football program. I'm going to go off that a little bit later in the segment. But Jimmy Rogers, Iowa State new head coach, assuming to bring some people with him. He said there was going to be some people there today to meet with the players, the current players, try to keep them in Ames and not into the portal. It sounds like there's a decent chance from what I heard that we're going to still retain a decent amount of people, but there's definitely going to be, some that follow Matt to Penn State or some that go elsewhere. So it will be very interesting over the next week or two to see what happens there, especially with Iowa State declining the bowl game. That'll be very, very interesting to see what happens. But one of the biggest gets that Iowa State has right now is the Toledo defensive assistant, Ross Watson, is coming to Iowa State. It sounds like Syracuse was looking at him a little bit and some other ACC schools. I know Toledo's head coach went to UConn. So it sounds like this is a really big win for Iowa State. I haven't looked up a whole lot about this Ross Watson guy, but it sounds like he was targeted several other places. So good to hear that we landed him. Background on Jimmy, I'm sure most of you probably know this already because we've been hearing all about it the last 48 hours basically. But Jimmy spent one season at Washington State, going 6-6. Before that, he was at South Dakota State, the head coach and defensive coordinator. So it sounds like he's big on the defensive end. I have some notable games to talk about, which is 5 of their losses. I'm not going to bring up any of their wins, but I'm bringing up 5 of their losses because I think it is really key to look at them with what I'm going to say after this. But they lost to North Texas 59-10. They lost to Washington 59-24. They lost at Ole Miss by 3. Ole Miss is in the playoff, by the way, and they lost at Virginia 22-20, and they lost at James Madison 24-20. The reason why I'm saying this is because he does have a very defensive mindset, but I think the biggest thing for Iowa State fans, and myself too, because I've been going back and forth with this, but I think the biggest thing that Iowa State fans need to look at with why this was happening, and if he's such a defensive-minded coach, why are you giving up 59 points? I think one of the biggest things to look at is he did have all new players last year. He did have, there was a lot of problems that I'm aware of from Washington State last season. So that is part of it. But I do feel pretty confident that depending on who we keep at Iowa State, that will improve a lot. And so I'm not too concerned about the defensive side of things. Obviously, we won't know until next season, and possibly not even till the season after that, because year one, you're always going to struggle a little bit, which is what I'm going to get to in a little bit. But yeah, so that is something that is going to be very interesting to follow, especially like to see if our players on defense, to see how many of them stay. I know we already have 2 transfers going out. There will likely be more over the next couple of days, I assume. I do also know, I think I said this earlier in this episode, but I know that there's a few other coaches that are going to be meeting with the players for Iowa State. So this is one of the things that Jimmy Rogers said that I wanted to talk a little bit about today in his press conference. He said, he was talking to the players when he said this as well. He said, the feeling you had walking onto campus, it wasn't just because of one person, but how a community made you feel. And I'm taking that, and also I'm putting it with what Matt Campbell said about Iowa State, because I think that is extremely, extremely true. And I know that this is super cliche and super, all this is said about everywhere, but I mean, I'm an Iowa State fan. Obviously, I've been to Iowa State games. I go to several every single season. But there is, and I'm young, so I was barely alive when Iowa State was used to going 3-9, 4-8, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit as well. But there is definitely something, and as a fan, I can imagine it's much bigger when you're a player, is that there is something when you walk onto that campus that it is special, and it really is. So again, I think it'll be very interesting to see who stays for Iowa State, and who goes and either follows Matt Campbell, or who stays with Iowa State, who goes and follows Matt Campbell, and who leaves and goes elsewhere. Will be very interesting to see. And like I said, I'm sure we'll get, some people, like I'm sure Rocco backed, because there's been a lot of speculation about him, if he's going to be in the portal or not. I'm sure, if he stays or if he goes, I'm sure we're going to get a statement from him sometime soon. From what I've heard, it sounds like pretty good things from Rocco. It sounds like from the vibe that I'm getting from him right now, it sounds like he is more than likely staying, which is good. Obviously, the more people that we can keep, the better. Especially, even if it's just someone like Rocco back, even if it's someone who's only going to be there for one more year, that would be huge, just to keep that leadership in the program and the team. That would be absolutely massive. The next thing I want to talk about is Jimmy and Jamie, our AD, about how they kind of came into contact. It sounds like they met a while ago. It sounds like TJ actually told him to hire Jimmy, which is crazy to think about, but I mean, they were obviously coaching at South Dakota State at the same time. But Jamie was telling, I'm sure a lot of you guys have probably already heard the story too, but Jamie was telling Jimmy asked him how he could become the next head coach of Iowa State, and Jamie replied saying, this is when Jimmy was still at South Dakota State, but he said something like, we need to get you to, coach at the next level before you can come to Iowa State, which I obviously think that is a good thing. I will say this too, with Jamie Pollard, have been slightly critical of him over the past, 2 years, year. I don't think I necessarily have been on this channel, but I am glad that we went out and got someone else, and instead of trying to promote within, because I will be shocked if there's, I will be shocked if most of our staff does not follow Matt Campbell over to Penn State. I will be very shocked if that does not happen. So I'm very glad that we're going out and getting other guys from other schools, from other universities, and bringing them to Iowa State rather than just, promoting guys up. So yeah, this is relating to what I was talking about with their Washington State's defense last year. Because I kind of want to get into the expectations for Iowa State fans. And I feel pretty, obviously I'm just one person, but I do feel pretty confident saying that I can speak for most Iowa State fans when I say this. Maybe not like the older generation of Iowa State fans were used to going 3-9, 4-8 before. But I think even some of them, if they're watching this video, I think some of you guys could probably agree with me on this. Expectations for Iowa State fans, though, I wouldn't say that they're skyrocket high. No one at Iowa State University expects us to go 9-3 or even 8-4 next season. That is not. I honestly, to be completely honest, I do not even expect necessarily to go to a bowl game next. I'm going to be completely honest. I do not expect to go to a bowl game next season. It is my expectation that we do win at least 4 or 5 games. Lord have mercy on Iowa State's soul if we go 3-9, 2-10, 1-11. God forbid 0-12. I don't think that's going to happen with our schedule the way that it looks to be right now. And I don't even want to talk about that, and I don't think that's ever going to be the case ever again. But what I will say with Iowa State expectations, and I'm going to get back into Matt Campbell with this as well, and this has been a very big point, I know, on other podcasts talking about this as well, before this had even happened, just when Matt Campbell's name was being brought up again. But for Iowa State fans, again, I think I'm speaking for a vast majority of Iowa State fans when I say this. We don't expect to go 8-4, 9-3, definitely not 10-2 in the first season of Jimmy. We do expect to at least have, 5-6 wins. That would be about the bare minimum. Are we going to fire a coach after the first year? Absolutely not. Unless he goes 0-12 or 1-11 or some crazy astronomically low number. What I will say, though, is by year 2, year 3, probably honestly year 3, I do think it is fair to say that Iowa State does expect to be about at the 8-win level. I think 9's a little too high. I think 6 is a little too low. But I do think the 8-win... I do think 8 wins is a good point to be at Iowa State in about year 3, year 4. And I again, like a lot of older Iowa State fans, they're used to when we went, 3-9, 4-8. I was about 5, 6, 7 years old when we were going 3-9, 4-8, 2-10 on a yearly basis. But I do think the last, all these people are talking about the new era. We're going to be back to those seasons again. It's like, well, I would pray to God that Jamie Pollard would not let that slide. And Jamie Pollard, I don't even know how long he's been our AD. I know he's been our AD for a very long time. But I pray to God that Jamie Pollard would not allow that to happen after year 4, after year 5, after year 6. I do think that with the fan base of Iowa State, and again, I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of Iowa State fans here, but we're not going to be cool with going 4-8 anymore. We're not going to be cool with going 5-7 anymore. First year, that's completely different. Not saying that I think we should go 2-10. I still think that we definitely should be in a bowl game next year, but I don't necessarily expect it because it's year 1. But I will say this with the new changes with Iowa State is, like I said, I do expect by year 3, year 4, we are, up to 8 wins. If we're better than that, if we're 9-10, that would be unbelievable, to be completely honest. But it is going to take a little bit of rebuilding. I don't think we're obviously going to fall off a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a huge stepping stone that we have to climb back to, but I also don't know if we will necessarily get back to, the 10-2 season or 11-2 or whatever it was last season when we beat Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. And that's the other thing too, Iowa State expectations. I don't think any Iowa State fan expects Iowa State to go to the college football playoff. That's the other thing, and I'm going to bring that up with Matt Campbell here in a second. But Iowa State fans, we do not expect to have a coach to go to the college football playoff. We don't. Do we expect to have a coach who takes us to the Big 12 championship? Not necessarily. I think, yes, 1 in every 5 years, kind of like Matt Campbell did with getting us there 2 times in his 10 years. Yeah, that's cool to go there. It shows how good we are. It shows how good of a program we've become. Or better, I should say. But winning the Big 12, and obviously if you win the Big 12, you're going to be in the playoff more than likely. If you lose the Big 12, you might not, which is stupid, which that's for a whole different video. But like Iowa State fans, we don't expect to be in the playoff. We don't expect to be in the Big 12 championship game every year. But we do expect to have, 8. Once you've, found your place in our university, in our program, after 3, 4, 5 years, we do expect you to have, 7 at minimum, maybe 6, but 8 win seasons, 9 win seasons, And I think that's just because it's all because of the last 10 years. It's because we have seen that this program can do it. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing for the Iowa State fan base moving forward, is knowing that we can win 8, 9 games a season. So I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. Going forward with Matt Campbell at Penn State, I'm not going to talk a ton about this, but the one thing that I will say, and obviously, I've seen a lot of hate towards Matt Campbell on Instagram and TikTok, wherever I go, it seems like there's, hate on Matt Campbell for leaving, which, I think every Iowa State fan has mixed emotions right now with him. One, for just being the fact that he leaves after an 8-4 season. We were supposed to be one of the Big 12 favorites this year, and obviously we hit 4-game losing streak that messed that all up. But I think a lot of Iowa State fans, this was our biggest thing when we heard about this, is like I feel like every Iowa State fan knew that there would be a day that we wouldn't have Matt Campbell as our head coach. Obviously, today's the third day that he's not. But I think when you look at Penn State and you look at James Franklin, and I guess I don't know the last 10 years necessarily of Penn State football and James Franklin, but when you look at Penn State, technically 2 years ago now, they were in the college football playoff at a 7 seed, I think. They had a home game against SMU, they won it. And they were in the Big Ten championship game that year as well against Oregon, and they lost. When you look at all that stuff, and then James Franklin comes back this past season, and you lose 3 games, he was like 3-3 or maybe even 2-3. And one of those losses was to Oregon, who's in the college football playoff. When that happens and you get fired for that, you're looking at Matt Campbell, and he's like, to me, necessarily right off the bat, that does not seem like the greatest. And I know a lot of it has to do with, Matt's going to have better resources. I know that he's going to have a lot more money for NIL, so he's going to get to bring in better players. And I know that there's been a lot of controversy, too, about, Jamie Pollard could have given Matt Campbell more money for that, but he couldn't, because we are financially really low on NIL. But it is just kind of very interesting to see how Penn State will handle that, because if you're Matt Campbell and you have the season that you just had at Iowa State, if you have that at Penn State in year 4, are you going to get fired for that job? Are you going to get fired from being the head coach at Penn State? So I think that is something that, will be interesting to look at for Penn State as an Iowa State fan over the next couple of years. Again, I completely wish Matt the best of luck. I do hope that he succeeds at Penn State. But man, it very, very different, and so many mixed emotions. And the one thing that I will say too with Matt Campbell, there was this whole thing online about how the players knew from social media and Matt didn't tell him, which if that's true, that does not seem like the typical Matt Campbell that Iowa State would have known. And I'm not trying to necessarily bash on Penn State's program at all. I think they're a great program, and they obviously have high expectations, which, to be fair, they should. They should have high expectations. They've done things that Iowa State hasn't done, and probably, honestly, will never do. But I do think that it is going to be interesting to see how Penn State, the staff, but also the fan base treats Matt Campbell if he does go like 8-4 in year 3 or even year 2. Because obviously, like I said, Penn State, and everyone knows this, Penn State has a lot higher expectations. Obviously, Matt Campbell is going to have a lot more resources, like I said, but I do think that'll be one of the more interesting things to look at down the road, down the future for Matt Campbell and Penn State. But no, best luck to Matt Campbell over at Penn State. Hopefully Jimmy Rogers is the right fit for us. From what I've read about him so far, it sounds like he's fairly solid for the most part. Obviously won national championships at South Dakota State, which is FCS level, but and there was some different guys too that when the news about Matt broke that I kind of looked at that I was kind of hoping for, but from what I've read so far, Jimmy seems like he's going to be, just fine. I'm really there's certain players that I hope stay at Iowa State. Obviously, you're going to have some transfer. I hope Rocco stays. I hope both of our running backs, Abu and Carson, stay. Bramer, I hope he stays, but out of all those guys, I do think Bramer, just because of his talent, I do think he probably will follow Penn State. And then there's some other guys, obviously, that I'm not going to go through the whole list, but yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see, like I said, who transfers, who goes out of Iowa State over the next couple of days, over the next weeks. So yeah. Anyways, hope you guys like this episode. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about basketball a lot more, specifically Iowa State, as we're looking pretty solid right now, number 4 in the country. AP poll just released a little bit ago. But yeah, next few episodes will probably be about basketball and as well the college football playoff, which is released. I'm going to talk about that. Hopefully I'll have another episode about that this week, but we'll have to see. So that is it for this episode. See you guys in the next one. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to the Big 12 Deep Dive, the podcast where we break down everything Big 12 football and basketball.